Bouncers kicked out the old man from the bar until the biker gang president recognized him. Acid, bar suisse. The Red Anchor wasn't the kind of bar that appeared in travel guides. Tucked between a pawn shop and a shuttered laundromat on the eastern edge of town, it was the sort of place where the neon sign flickered more than it glowed, where the wood of the bar top had absorbed decades of spilled beer and broken promises. Friday nights brought a particular crowd, leather vests, chrome motorcycles lined up outside like sleeping metal beasts, and the low rumble of men who'd found Brotherhood in the open road. Marcus Webb stood at the corner of the bar, nursing a glass of water with a slice of lemon. He was 73 years old, though the years had been kinder to some parts of him than others. His hands were steady, marked with scars that formed a topographical map of a life lived hard. He wore a simple flannel shirt, worn jeans, and boots that had been resoled at least 3 times. His hair was silver, cut military short out of habit more than style, and his eyes, pale blue and steady, had the particular quality of someone who'd learned to see what others missed. He'd been coming to the Red Anchor for 3 weeks now, always on Friday nights, always alone. He'd order water, sometimes a ginger ale if Mary was tending bar and insisted. He'd sit quietly, watching the room with the patience of someone who understood that some things couldn't be rushed. Tonight, the energy was different. The Iron Jackals had claimed their usual territory, the back corner where 3 tables had been pushed together, surrounded by chairs that groaned under the weight of men who lived large and rode hard. There were maybe 20 of them tonight, their leather cuts displaying the club's colors, a snarling jackal head over crossed pistons, the words Iron Jackals MC arched above it. They were loud in the way of men who owned their space, their laughter rolling through the bar like thunder before a storm. Marcus watched them, the way he watched everything, with quiet attention that never quite became staring. He noted the hierarchy, the deference shown to a man in his late 50s with a gray beard braided down his chest, wearing a president's patch. He noted the younger members, eager and restless, proving themselves through volume and bravado. He noted the way they moved, the patterns of their attention, and he noted when that attention turned toward him. It started with Connor, one of the bouncers. Connor was 28, 6'4", with arms like industrial cables and a jawline that had broken more than its share of hands. He'd been a college linebacker before the injuries ended that dream, and he'd brought the same aggressive energy to his work at the Red Anchor. He approached the bar where Marcus sat, his boots heavy on the worn floor. "Hey, old-timer," Connor said, his voice carrying that particular edge of someone used to being obeyed. "You gonna order something besides water tonight, or you just taking up space?" Marcus looked up slowly, met the younger man's eyes with that same calm attention he gave everything. "Water's fine for me, son, but I appreciate you checking." The son did it. Connor's jaw tightened. "This ain't a library, Grandpa. You want to sit around reading the room, go to the senior center. This is a bar. You order drinks or you leave." Mary, the bartender, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and zero tolerance for bullshit, leaned over. "Connor, he's not bothering anyone. Leave him be." "I'm doing my job, Mary. Management says we need to keep the seats turning over." Connor placed a hand on the bar near Marcus's glass, leaning in with the kind of casual intimidation he'd probably learned worked on most people. "So, what's it gonna be? You ordering a real drink or you moving along?" Marcus set down his glass carefully, precisely. "I'll have another water when you get a chance, Mary. With lemon, please." Connor's face flushed. "You think you're funny?" "No, sir, just thirsty." Behind them, some of the Iron Jackals had started to notice the interaction. A few were laughing, enjoying the show. One of the younger members, a kid maybe 25 with prospect on his cut, called out, "Yo, Connor, you need backup dealing with Grandpa over there?" The laughter that followed was ugly, meant to cut. Connor straightened, his chest puffing out slightly. This was about pride now, about status in front of the crowd. "Let's go, old man. You're done here." "I haven't finished my water." "You're finished when I say you're finished." Connor reached for Marcus's arm. What happened next happened fast, but not violently. As Connor's hand came down, Marcus moved, a simple shift of weight, a turn of his shoulder that put Connor's grip on air instead of flesh. It wasn't aggressive, wasn't a challenge. It was just absent, like trying to grab smoke. Connor's eyes narrowed. He reached again, and again Marcus wasn't quite where he expected. The old man had shifted on his stool, still facing forward, still calm, but somehow just outside of Connor's reach. "You need to leave, now." Connor's voice had gone hard and cold. Marcus sighed, the sound of someone who'd hoped things would go differently. "If that's what you need me to do." He stood slowly, his movements careful but not fragile. He pulled a few dollars from his wallet, exact change plus a generous tip for Mary, and set them on the bar. He was reaching for the light jacket on the stool next to him when Connor made his third mistake of the evening. He shoved Marcus toward the door. It wasn't a hard shove, not enough to hurt, but enough to move someone along. Except Marcus didn't move the way Connor expected. The old man absorbed the push with a subtle shift, his center of gravity adjusting in a way that spoke of muscle memory decades old. And when he turned to face Connor, there was something different in his eyes. Not anger, not challenge. Something older and colder, a kind of assessment that made Connor, for just a second, feel like he was being measured for a purpose he didn't understand. "I'm going," Marcus said quietly. "There's no need for this." "Damn right you're going." The second bouncer, Tyler, had appeared now, drawn by the commotion. Together, they flanked Marcus, herding him toward the door, while the Iron Jackals watched and laughed, the prospect making exaggerated old man gestures that his brothers found hilarious. Marcus walked between them with quiet dignity, his shoulders straight despite the humiliation. When they reached the door, Connor gave him one final shove out into the parking lot. "Stay out, old man. Find somewhere else to waste your time." The door closed behind him with a heavy thud, cutting off the laughter inside. Marcus stood in the parking lot, the cool April air washing over him, and allowed himself a moment, just one, to feel the weight of it, the disrespect, the casual cruelty, the laughter of men who would never understand what they didn't know. Then he put his hands in his pockets and started walking toward the sidewalk. He'd made it maybe 20 yards when the door to the Red Anchor burst open again, and the night shifted into something else entirely. Seat 2. The man who emerged from the Red Anchor moved with the kind of authority that stopped conversations. He was built like an aging oak, thick through the chest and shoulders, his beard gray and meticulously braided, his eyes sharp beneath heavy brows. The president's patch on his cut wasn't just decoration. It was a statement of fact. This was Frank Reaper Morrison, and the Iron Jackal's MC followed where he led. Behind him came 3 more members, including his sergeant-at-arms, a mountain of a man known simply as Ox. "Hold up!" Reaper's voice carried across the parking lot like a command. Not a request, a command. Marcus stopped but didn't turn immediately. He stood very still, hands in his pockets, his breath forming small clouds in the night air. Reaper walked up beside him, not confrontational, but deliberately in his space. "You got a minute, brother?" Marcus turned slowly. Up close, Reaper could see the lines in the older man's face, the particular set of his jaw, the way his eyes tracked movement without seeming to move at all. "I'm not your brother," Marcus said quietly. "But yes, I have a minute. What's your name?" "Marcus Webb." Reaper went very still. The 3 men behind him exchanged glances, but Reaper just stood there, studying Marcus's face like he was reading a page he'd thought lost years ago. "Marcus Webb," Reaper repeated slowly. "And before you were sitting in my bar getting hassled by meatheads, what did you do, Marcus Webb?" "I worked for the government." "What kind of work?" "The kind that doesn't make it into resumes." A slow smile spread across Reaper's face, though his eyes stayed serious. "You ever work out of Stuttgart, early 90s? Marcus's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. "I spent some time in Germany." "I'll bet you did." Reaper turned to his brothers. "Ox, go inside. Get Connor and Tyler out here, right fucking now." Ox disappeared back into the bar without question. Reaper turned back to Marcus, and now his whole demeanor had shifted. There was respect there, and something else. Something that looked like awe mixed with old fear. 1993, Reaper said quietly. "I was Army, 1st Armored Division, deployed to Bosnia through Germany. We had a situation. Convoy got hit outside Tuzla, bad intel, worse timing. We lost 3 men, had 2 more bleeding out, and we were pinned down by what we thought was just local militia." He paused, his jaw working. "Until they weren't local militia. Turned out to be Serbian special forces running an off-book operation. We were about to get erased from the fucking map, and the army couldn't officially help us because we weren't officially supposed to be where we were. Marcus listened without expression, but his stillness had quality to it now, the stillness of someone waiting to see how much would be said, how much remembered. Then this four-man team showed up out of nowhere, Reaper continued. No insignia, no ID, just appeared. They extracted us from a situation that should have gotten us all killed, neutralized the Serbian unit, and disappeared before our commanding officer could even properly debrief us. We were told it never happened. The men we lost were listed as training accidents. The whole thing got classified into oblivion. He leaned closer to Marcus, his voice dropping. But I remember the team leader, tall guy, civilian contractor type, but moved like something else entirely. And I remember his second, shorter, quiet, with these cold blue eyes that saw everything. Had a scar here. Reaper touched the left side of his jaw, from what looked like shrapnel. Never said much, but when he did move, Reaper shook his head slowly. It was like watching something perfect happen, efficient, absolute. Marcus's hand came up unconsciously, touching the same spot on his own jaw, where a faint white line bisected the weathered skin. The scars faded, Marcus said quietly. It's been 30 years. Jesus Christ! Reaper actually took a step back. You're him. You're actually him. We called you the Ghost. That was you. We had a lot of names. None of them were on our records. The door to the Red Anchor opened again, and Ox emerged with Connor and Tyler in tow. Both bouncers looked confused and irritated, pulled from their posts for reasons they didn't understand. What's going on, Reaper? Connor asked, his tone careful but edged with the confidence of someone who thought he was being summoned to back up the club. Reaper didn't look at him. His eyes stayed locked on Marcus. You know who this is? Connor glanced at Marcus dismissively. Some old guy who was taking up space at the bar. You were just disrespecting a man who's forgotten more about courage than you'll ever learn. Reaper's voice had gone cold and hard as iron. This man saved my life, saved the lives of my entire unit when we were 20 seconds from getting executed in a ditch in Bosnia, and you put your hands on him and threw him out of a bar like he was garbage. Connor's face went pale. I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. Reaper's voice cracked like a whip. Because you didn't ask. You didn't look past the gray hair and the quiet demeanor. You saw an old man, and you decided he didn't deserve respect. You decided he didn't belong. He turned to face Connor fully now, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Let me tell you something about men like Marcus Webb. While you were playing high school football and flexing in mirrors, men like him were keeping this country safe in ways you'll never hear about. They were making impossible decisions in impossible situations, and they did it without medals, without recognition, without anyone knowing their goddamn names. Tyler, the second bouncer, looked like he wanted to disappear into the pavement. Connor opened his mouth, closed it, then found his voice. I'm sorry, I didn't. You're not apologizing to me, Reaper cut him off. You're apologizing to him. Connor turned to Marcus, and for the first time since the old man had sat down at the Red Anchor 3 weeks ago, someone there looked at him and actually saw him. Mr. Webb, I'm sorry. I was out of line. I shouldn't have treated you that way. Marcus studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. Apology accepted. You were doing your job as you understood it, but maybe next time, understand it a little better. The quiet reproach in those words hit harder than any shouting would have. Reaper turned back to Marcus, and his whole body language had shifted. Would you come back inside, please, as my personal guest? Marcus looked at the bar, at the neon sign still flickering, at the door he'd been shoved through minutes before. I don't want to cause trouble. The only trouble in there is about to get a very different kind of education. Reaper gestured toward the door. Please, it would be an honor. Marcus considered this, then nodded slowly. All right. They walked back toward the Red Anchor together, Marcus, Reaper, Ox, and the 2 Chasen bouncers. Behind them, other members of the Iron Jackals had started to gather, sensing that something important was happening, drawn by the gravity of Reaper's tone and the strange, quiet dignity of the old man at the center of it all. When they entered the bar, conversations died like candles snuffed. Every eye turned toward the door, toward Reaper walking in with his hand on the shoulder of the same old man who'd been thrown out not 10 minutes before. Mary, behind the bar, stopped mid-pour. The prospect who'd been making jokes looked suddenly uncertain, The whole room held its breath, waiting. Reaper guided Marcus to the Iron Jackal's corner, to the president's seat, his seat, and pulled it out. "Please." Marcus hesitated. "That's your chair. Tonight, it's yours." Marcus sat, and Reaper remained standing, turning to address the bar. His voice, when he spoke, carried the kind of authority that came from respect earned through years and blood. "Everybody listen up," Reaper said. "I want to tell you a story." Ace T3. The Red Anchor had never been this quiet. Even the jukebox seemed to sense the moment, the last song fading into silence without another queuing up. Reaper stood beside Marcus, one hand resting on the back of the chair, the other gesturing as he spoke. "December 1993, Reaper began. "I was 22 years old, thought I knew everything, thought I was invincible. I was part of a convoy running humanitarian supplies through Bosnia. Officially, we were just there to observe. Unofficially," he shook his head, "we were in the shit. We got ambushed outside Tuzla. The intel said it was clear, but someone had sold us out. Serbian special forces, well-equipped, well-trained, and very motivated to make sure nobody found out they were operating in that sector. The Iron Jackals were listening with the kind of attention soldiers give to war stories from their brothers. Some of them knew parts of Reaper's history, but this was deeper, older. We lost 3 men in the first minute," Reaper continued, his voice dropping. "Martinez, Chen, and Kowalski. Good men, young men. The kind who write letters home every week and carry pictures of girls they plan to marry. We had 2 more bleeding out, and we were pinned in a kill zone with no air support, no QRF coming, and brass pretending we didn't exist, because the mission was never official in the first place." He paused, his jaw working, old pain surfacing. "I was sergeant then, in charge of what was left. 11 men, 2 critically wounded, ammunition running low, and a force of maybe 30 trained killers closing in. I called in every favor, every contact, every piece of communication I had, and I got static, because officially, we weren't there, and officially, we were already ghosts." Marcus sat very still in Reaper's chair, his hands folded in his lap, listening. Then, out of nowhere, we heard it. 4 suppressed shots, so close together they sounded like one long burst. 4 of the Serbs dropped like someone cut their strings. We didn't even know where the shots came from. Then smoke, covering fire that came from angles that shouldn't have existed. And then 4 men appeared in our perimeter, like they'd materialized out of thin air. Reaper looked down at Marcus. No insignia, no name tags, no unit patch, just 4 men who moved like they were parts of the same machine. The team leader was this tall, cold-eyed son of a bitch who looked at our situation, nodded once, and started giving orders like he'd been born. Commanding, his second, Reaper touched Marcus's shoulder gently, was this man right here. The bar was so quiet you could hear the ice settling in glasses. "They pulled us out," Reaper said, "carried our wounded, covered our extraction, neutralized a superior force that had every advantage, and got us to a safe zone within 90 minutes. Then they vanished. Just gone. No debrief, no report. Our CO told us the operation never happened. The men we lost were listed as training accidents. The medals we should have received for surviving that hell were never discussed. It was like the whole thing got erased." He circled around to face Marcus directly. "Except I remember. I remember your face. I remember the way you moved. I remember that when one of my men, kid named Patterson, just turned 19, started panicking, losing it because he was covered in Martinez's blood, you stopped. In the middle of a firefight, with rounds still coming in, you stopped and put your hand on his shoulder. You looked him in the eye and said, 'Breathe, you're going to make it, but I need you here, now.' And he came back. He focused. He survived." Marcus's expression hadn't changed, but something flickered in his eyes. Memory, recognition of himself in that moment. "Patterson's 49 now," Reaper said quietly. "Married, 3 kids, runs a construction company in Oregon. He made it because of you. We all made it because of you." He turned to address the entire bar again. "So when I saw this man getting disrespected, getting shoved out the door like he was nothing, like he was just some old guy taking up space, I need everyone here to understand what that means. This man, Marcus Webb, is what quiet courage looks like. He didn't do what he did for recognition. He didn't do it for medals or parades. He did it because it needed doing, and then he went back into the shadows and lived with the weight of it. Ox, the sergeant-at-arms, spoke up from his position near the bar. His voice was rough, emotional. My old man was Army too, served in the Gulf. He used to tell me there were men who operated in the spaces between the official story and the truth. Said they were the ones who did the impossible shit that kept everything else running. Said we'd never know their names, but we'd know the world was safer because of them. He looked at Marcus with something approaching reverence. He was talking about men like you, wasn't he? Marcus cleared his throat softly. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear, carrying in the silence. There were a lot of us, different teams, different operations, different wars that never made the newspapers. We did what needed doing. Some of us came home, some didn't. The ones who didn't, they're the ones who deserve the recognition, not me. With respect, sir, Reaper said, you all deserve it, but especially the ones who came home and kept serving by staying silent. Mary approached from behind the bar, her eyes wet. She set, a glass of whiskey in front of Marcus, top shelf, the good stuff they kept for special occasions. This one's on the house, Mr. Webb, and I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you harder. You did fine, Marcus said gently. You were kind. That matters more than you know. The prospect who'd been making jokes earlier, the one who'd called out mocking questions about needing backup with Grandpa, stood up. He looked young and ashamed and deeply uncomfortable. Sir, I said some things. I'm sorry. I was being a dick. Marcus studied him for a moment, then nodded. You're young. Youth makes mistakes. The question is whether you learn from them. He paused, then added, What's your name? Derek, sir. Derek Mills. You ride with the Iron Jackals? I'm prospecting, sir, hoping to earn my patch. Then let me tell you something about earning, Derek. Respect isn't given because someone's old or young, big or small, strong or weak. It's given because you recognize the humanity in another person, the worth, the story they carry, whether you know it or not. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. Every person you meet is carrying weight you can't see. They've survived things you don't know about. They've loved, lost, fought, endured. When you look at someone and decide they're less than, you're not seeing them. You're just seeing your own limitations. Derek nodded, unable to speak. Reaper raised his beer. To Marcus Webb, ghost, legend, and the man who reminds us what real courage looks like. The Iron Jackals stood as one, raising their glasses. To Marcus Webb. Marcus raised his whiskey, uncomfortable with the attention, but too gracious to refuse it. He took a small sip, the first alcohol he'd had in months, and felt the burn chase down old memories. As the toasts settled and people returned to their conversations, softer now, more thoughtful, Reaper sat down across from Marcus. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why were you coming here? To the Red Anchor? 3 weeks every Friday night, just sitting at the bar with water. What were you looking for? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, turning the whiskey glass in his hands. The amber liquid caught the light, throwing shadows on the scarred table. My son, he said finally. His name was David. He rode with a club out west. I didn't approve, initially. Thought it was reckless, dangerous. We argued about it. His voice grew softer, distant. He died 2 years ago. Motorcycle accident. Clean road, clear day, just went down wrong. Broke his neck. Reaper's expression shifted to understanding and sorrow. After he passed, I found his journal, Marcus continued. He wrote about his brothers in the club, about what it meant to ride together, to trust each other with your life every time you got on the bike. He wrote that his MC was the closest thing to the teams I served on, that brotherhood, that loyalty. He said he finally understood what I'd never been able to tell him about my service. Marcus's hands tightened slightly on the glass. I realized I'd spent so much time disapproving that I'd never really tried to understand. So I started going to MC bars, different ones, different nights, sitting quietly, watching, trying to see what he saw, trying to understand what he found there that was worth dying for. The weight of that confession settled over the table like snow. Jesus, Reaper breathed. Marcus, I'm so sorry. He was 34, Marcus said. Had a daughter. She's 9 now. I see her every weekend. She asks about her dad, and I tell her stories. But I needed to have better stories. Stories that honored what he chose, not just what I lost. Ox had drifted over, listening. Several other Iron Jackals had as well, drawn by the quiet gravity of the conversation. What was his club? Ox asked gently. Desert Riders, out of Nevada. Good club, one of the Iron Jackals said, a older member with a gray ponytail. I met some of their chapter at a national run in Sturgis. Solid brothers. Marcus nodded. I'm learning that. I'm learning a lot of things I should have learned while he was alive. Reaper leaned forward, his voice thick with emotion. Your son would be proud of you. Coming here, trying to understand, keeping an open heart even after loss. That takes courage too. Different kind, but just as real. I'm just trying to be a better grandfather than I was a father, Marcus said quietly. Better late than never, I suppose. A seat. 4. The night stretched on, but it was different now. The Red Anchor had transformed from a bar into something else, a space where stories mattered, where respect was currency, and where an old man in worn flannel had become the center of something important. Iron Jackals who'd been at other tables drifted over, drawn by the gravity of what was happening. They asked careful questions, and Marcus answered what he could, though much of his past remained locked behind classifications that would outlive him. But he could tell them about Bosnia in general terms, about the feeling of pulling men from impossible situations, about the brothers he'd served with who never came home. And slowly, cautiously, he asked them questions too, about riding, about the clubs, about what they found on the road that they couldn't find anywhere else. Derek, the prospect, sat quietly at the edge of the group, listening with the intensity of someone receiving an education he hadn't known he needed. At one point, Marcus turned to him directly. You have family, Derek? Yes, sir, my dad. We don't talk much. Why not? Derek shifted uncomfortably. He thinks the club is stupid, dangerous, says I'm wasting my life riding with bikers when I should be in college or getting a real job. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding flickering in his eyes. Maybe one day you'll have a son who makes choices you don't understand, choices that scare you because you love him, and you can't protect him from the world. He paused, choosing his words carefully. When that day comes, I hope you'll remember that disapproval and understanding aren't the same thing. Love means trying to see through someone else's eyes, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Derek swallowed, nodding. Yes, sir. I'll remember. As the night wore on, Mary brought over plates of food, the Red Anchor's limited but honest menu of burgers and wings. Marcus ate slowly, finding himself laughing at stories about rides gone wrong, about the camaraderie of the road, about the particular freedom that came from trusting your life to the machine between your legs and the brothers riding beside you. Reaper watched him with quiet satisfaction. At one point, he leaned over and said, You're welcome here, Marcus. Anytime. Every time. Your money's no good, and your seat is reserved. I can't accept that, Marcus said. I pay my way. Then we'll donate your money to wounded veterans, Reaper countered. But you're family now. That's not negotiable. Around 11 o'clock, as the crowd began to thin, Ox approached with something in his hand. It was a leather vest, a clean, unadorned cut without club colors. We had this in the shop, Ox said gruffly. Been sitting there for months. Good leather, just never found the right owner, until now. Marcus took it carefully, feeling the weight, the quality. I can't wear your colors. I'm not Iron Jackals. We're not asking you to, Reaper said. But you're a rider in spirit, even if you don't own a bike. And you're our brother, whether you wear a patch or not. That vest is just leather. What you choose to do with it is up to you. Marcus stood, slipping the vest on. It fit perfectly across his shoulders, settled against him like it had been waiting. He ran his hands down the front, feeling the smooth leather, the weight of the gesture. Thank you, he said quietly. All of you. You've given me something I didn't know I needed. What's that? Derek asked. A glimpse of what my son found, why he rode, what it meant to him. Marcus looked around at the faces watching him, some old, some young, all marked by the road in different ways. He found brotherhood, loyalty, a place where a man's word meant something, where your brothers had your back, where the ride mattered more than the destination. His voice cracked slightly. I couldn't see it before, but I see it now. The Iron Jackals stood, and one by one they approached Marcus. Each clasped his hand or gripped his shoulder, silent acknowledgments passing between men who understood that some things didn't need words. Derek was among the last, and when he shook Marcus's hand, he held on for an extra moment. I'm going to call my dad tomorrow, Derek said. Maybe try to build a bridge. Marcus gripped his hand tighter. "He'll appreciate it more than you know, even if he doesn't say so." As midnight approached, Marcus prepared to leave. Reaper walked him to the door, and the entire bar watched them go. Outside, the night had turned cool and clear, stars visible despite the urban light pollution. "You need a ride home?" Reaper asked. "I'm just a few blocks away. I'll walk, clear my head." "Then I'll walk with you. Make sure you get there safe." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their boots hitting the pavement in rhythm. Finally, Marcus spoke. "In Bosnia, after we got your unit out, we had to go back. There were 3 bodies we couldn't recover during the extraction: Martinez, Chen, and Kowalski. You mentioned their names." Reaper stopped walking. "We went back the next night," Marcus continued, his voice low. "Just the 4 of us. Recovered the bodies, returned them to your command post before dawn. It wasn't in any report, wasn't part of any official action. But we couldn't leave them there, couldn't let their families wait for remains that might never come home." Reaper's eyes had filled with tears. "I never knew. We always wondered. They came back in flag-draped coffins 3 weeks later, but nobody would tell us how. Command just said they'd been recovered." "They were brothers," Marcus said simply. "Yours and ours. We take care of our brothers." They stood there under the streetlight, 2 men bound by history and sacrifice, by the unspoken codes that governed certain lives. Finally, Reaper pulled Marcus into a fierce embrace. "Thank you," he said roughly, "for all of it, for then, for tonight, for everything." When they separated, Marcus's eyes were wet too, though his voice stayed steady. "Your son would be proud of you," Marcus said. "Building something good, taking care of your brothers, honoring the code." "So would yours," Reaper replied. "You're here, you're trying, you're keeping his memory alive the right way. That's what matters." They walked the remaining blocks to Marcus's small apartment, a tidy place that still carried traces of a family that had scattered through time and loss. At the door, they shook hands one final time. "Same time next Friday?" Reaper asked. Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "Same time next Friday. Bring stories about David if you want. We'd like to hear them. Honor him the way he deserves." "I'll do that." Reaper headed back toward the Red Anchor, and Marcus climbed the stairs to his apartment. Inside, he hung the leather vest carefully on the back of a chair, then moved to the small shelf where he kept photographs. David smiled out from several frames, young, vital, mounted on a Harley with his Desert Riders brothers behind him. Marcus touched the frame gently. "I'm beginning to understand, son. I'm sorry it took so long." He made himself tea, sat by the window, and watched the street below. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear motorcycles, the distinctive rumble of engines, the sound of Brotherhood on the move. He closed his eyes and listened, and for the first time in 2 years, the sound brought comfort instead of pain. In the leather vest on, the chair behind him, the empty back panel waited. Marcus didn't know if he'd ever put a patch there, didn't know if he'd ever truly earned the right to call himself a rider. But he knew he'd been given something precious tonight, a bridge to his son's world, built by men who understood that some bonds transcend time, circumstance, and the accidents of fate. He thought about Reaper's unit, saved from darkness in a distant war. He thought about Derek, who'd call his father tomorrow and try to mend what was broken. He thought about all the quiet moments of courage he had witnessed and enacted over a lifetime of service, the ones that never made the news, never earned medals, never became part of any official record. And he thought about David, who'd found his own version of service on the open road, who'd built his own brotherhood, who'd lived by his own code, different from Marcus's path, but parallel, connected. Outside, the motorcycles had faded into the night, but their echo remained. Marcus finished his tea, said his nightly prayer for the men he'd lost over the years, and went to bed with the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to understand, to connect, to honor the past, while building towards something better. Closing. The Red Anchor still stands on the eastern edge of town, between the pawn shop and the laundromat. The neon sign still flickers, and Friday nights still bring the iron jackals, their motorcycles lined up outside like chrome sentinels. But things are different now. Connor and Tyler treat every patron with measured respect, especially the older ones, especially the quiet ones. They've learned that you can't measure a person's worth by their volume or their visibility, that some of the most extraordinary people move through the world like smoke, present, powerful, but easily overlooked if you're not paying attention. Derek earned his patch 6 months after that night. At his induction ceremony, he asked Marcus to be there, and the old man came wearing his leather vest. On the back, Derek had arranged for a simple patch to be placed, custom made with Reaper's approval, a single word in silver thread against the black leather. Ghost. Not claiming credit, not demanding recognition. Just a quiet acknowledgement of what he'd been, what he'd done, what he'd sacrificed. Marcus rides now too, though not as often as the younger members. Reaper helped him find a used Harley, taught him the basics he'd never learned, and now sometimes on Sunday mornings, you can see Marcus Webb rolling through town at the center of an Iron Jackals formation, protected by brothers who know his worth. He still has dinner with his granddaughter every weekend. She's 11 now, asking harder questions about her father, about death, about meaning. Marcus tells her stories about the desert riders, about the Iron Jackals, about the roads her father rode and the brothers he loved. He tells her that courage comes in many forms, that service means different things to different people, that the measure of a life isn't in awards or recognition, but in the connections we forge and the people we lift up along the way. Sometimes, late at night at the Red Anchor, after most of the crowd has gone home, Reaper and Marcus sit together over whiskey and coffee. They talk about Bosnia sometimes, carefully, around the edges of what can be said. They talk about David, about Patterson out in Oregon, about Chen and Martinez and Kowalski and all the names carved into memory. And they talk about the future, about Derek and the other young prospects, about the next generation of riders, about keeping the Brotherhood strong and true, about passing down not just the traditions of the road, but something deeper, the understanding that we're all connected, that we all carry weight, that respect is earned through showing up and staying true and honoring the bonds that matter. Mary still tends bar, still keeps the good whiskey reserved for special occasions, still remembers the night everything changed, the night an old man got kicked out of her bar and came back as something else, something important. The night the Red Anchor learned what it means to look past the surface and see the depth beneath. Connor has Marcus's photo on his phone now, a picture from Derek's patch ceremony, Marcus standing proud in his vest, surrounded by Iron Jackals. Sometimes when he's training new security staff, Connor shows them that photo and tells the story, not to shame himself, though the shame is still there, but to teach them, to remind them that every person who walks through that door carries stories you don't know, scars you can't see, and worth that doesn't announce itself with volume or flash. In a box under Marcus's bed, alongside his military commendations that remain classified, alongside the medals he was never officially awarded, alongside the photographs of teams that never existed, there's a new addition, a photograph of the Iron Jackals, taken on a cool spring evening outside the Red Anchor. Marcus is in the center, Reaper's arm across his shoulders, surrounded by men who would ride into fire for each other. On the back, in Reaper's careful handwriting, "To the Ghost, our brother, our inspiration, our reminder that courage lives quietly and service never ends. Ride eternal, Iron Jackals MC, May 2024. Marcus reads it sometimes, when the weight of memory gets heavy, when the ghosts of Bosnia or Baghdad or any of the other places blur the edges of sleep. He reads it and remembers that he's not alone, has never been alone, that the Brotherhood he served with in the shadows found him again in a bar at the edge of town, through the son he'd lost, and the men who remembered. The motorcycles still rumble through the streets on Friday nights. The Iron Jackals still claim their corner. The beer still flows, and the stories still get told. But now there's another story woven into the fabric of the Red Anchor. A story about an old man who got disrespected, and a biker who remembered, and the bridge that formed between past and present, between service and sacrifice, between what we lose and what we carry forward. It's not a story about redemption exactly. Marcus never needed redeeming. He'd done his duty, paid his costs, earned his peace. It's a story about recognition, about seeing, about the quiet courage it takes to show up, day after day, carrying weight nobody else can see, honoring bonds that transcend official records and public acknowledgement. It's a story about fathers and sons, about the roads we choose and the brothers we find along the way, about learning, even late in life, to see through someone else's eyes, to honor their path, even when it diverges from our own. Most of all, it's a story about what happens when we look past the surface, past the gray hair and the quiet demeanor, past the leather and the motorcycles, past all the things we think we know, and see the truth beneath, that every person is carrying something, that every life has weight, that respect is always earned, but recognition must be given freely. That brotherhood transcends uniforms and patches and official designations. That service comes in many forms, all of them worthy, that we're all, in the end, just trying to honor the people we've lost and the bonds that remain. On Marcus Webb's vest, the word ghost catches the light every Friday night as he walks into the Red Anchor. The bouncers nod with genuine respect. Mary has his coffee ready. The Iron Jackals stand when he enters, not out of obligation, but out of recognition, of what he was, of what he did, of what he represents. And every week, before the stories start and the night unfolds, there's a moment, just a moment, when the whole bar goes quiet, when Marcus raises his glass in a simple toast and everyone joins him, to the ones who didn't come home, to the brothers who ride eternal, to the service that goes unrecognized and the courage that lives quietly, to the connections that save us and the stories that keep us whole. History forgets the noise, but it remembers the silence that followed, and in that silence men like Marcus Webb, ghosts and fathers, soldiers and riders, the ones who showed up and stayed true, are finally properly honored, not with parades, not with medals, just with presence, with respect, with brotherhood. And that, in the end, is what matters most. End. In memory of all who served in silence and all who ride in brotherhood,